Hi and welcome back to Karuna channel. Today's video is about Theravada Buddhism, the original teachings of the great enlightened Buddha. If you're interested in knowing why Theravada Buddhism is considered a difficult path to follow and you want to know the truth about it, then keep watching. There is a lot of information available on Buddhism nowadays, and you might already be practicing Buddhism in one of its forms. But unfortunately, not everything that is said about Theravada Buddhism is helpful, especially if someone is looking for ways to connect more with the original teachings. Theravada Buddhism is often mistakenly categorized as a strict monasticism that rejects this life, whereas other more modified schools of Buddhism are described in terms of their ability to offer spiritual guidelines that benefit this life. I am a Sri Lankan living in the West, and I learned the original teachings of the Theravada Buddhism with the help of the noble monks in Sri Lanka. So today I thought to try and clarify some of those misconceptions for you in the hopes it might help you in your path to wisdom and freedom. So let's begin.
What is Theravada Buddhism?
The original discourse in which the noble Buddha taught the Dhamma was transmitted orally by his disciples, the noble Sangha, in unchanged form, and today it is preserved in written form called Tripitaka in Sri Lanka. Based on these original teachings, other forms of more modified and adapted versions emerged in the northern parts of Asia, and those forms make up the majority of what is collectively practiced as Buddhism in the West. But now let's focus on the original teachings.
Does Theravada Buddhism reject this world as suffering, and therefore if you practice it, you will not be able to enjoy the pleasures of this world?
The answer is no. It is the opposite of it. Yes, in order to attain the level of understanding that is required, you do analyze the world and life. When you learn the original teachings, you realize the concept of universal suffering is not what you understand at face value. Misunderstanding occurs because these concepts of suffering carry negative connotations for us worldly beings, because all our efforts are directed towards making this world a better place, overcoming difficulties in life, and looking forward to good times. In other words, we are constantly in a battle of balancing the sorrows and pleasures of life. So to say this world is exclusively suffering is almost an insult to that daily effort. But what Theravada Buddhism aims at is to reveal the reversed image of suffering, meaning the absence of suffering. This is why the Theravada concept of universal suffering is not to be taken at face value, because then you run the risk of ignoring a golden key to the absence of universal suffering. Therefore, it should be corrected that Theravada Buddhism does not reject this world, but the suffering of this world represented by the world formed by the five senses. In other words, it accepts only the joys of this world. Again, do not take this at face value. The key to figuring it all out lies in the original teachings.
Does Theravada Buddhism follow a strict monastic path, and therefore only monks can practice it?
The answer is no, at least not exclusively. This is a distinction made by many when comparing Theravada Buddhism to other later forms of Buddhism, that it is strict monasticism with the aim of attaining the stage of non-returning Arahant. This is misleading due to the fact that it leads us to think that Theravada Buddhism begins by renouncing the world. And since many of us are not willing to leave our material wealth and our loved ones to become a monk, we shy away from learning Theravada Buddhism. But before I tell you why this is not the case, let's clarify.
What is an Arahant?
To put it in the simplest of terms, it is the completion of freedom from suffering. What comes next is the absolute absence of suffering. If it is the completion of freedom from suffering, then it has to be a process that carries a rising tendency of freedom from suffering through to its completion. The stage of Arahant is described as non-returning, and to understand what non-returning means requires extensive learning. So my intention here is to emphasize the bliss of freedom from suffering, which anyone can enjoy once you enter the process. The process essentially means the learning of the original teachings, and this learning has less to do with your setting, whether monastic or secular, because all that is required is you yourself and your discerning faculties wherever you are.
Then why would someone choose to become a monk?
When you start learning the Four Noble Truths that clarify suffering, you begin to enjoy the bliss of freedom from suffering, or nibbana, in ratio to the level of your grasping of the truth of suffering. And this bliss becomes much more worthy to pursue and increase in comparison to the worldly pleasures. That means, in ideal case, you don't become a monk out of depression. you become a monk out of the knowledge of the bliss of freedom from suffering. Again, if you take this at face value, then it seems like an easy escape from one's responsibilities in the world. That is why a correct understanding of the concepts in Theravada Buddhism is utterly necessary.
Can you practice Theravada Buddhism in a secular environment?
The answer is a big yes. When it comes to describing how you practice Theravada Buddhism in a secular environment, it is often confined to worshipping and performing rituals in temples. Worshipping and rituals have meanings that go much deeper than what they appear on the surface, but I'm not going to talk about that in this video. Instead, did you know that the most famous disciples of the Buddha came from a secular environment? The great Vishaka, the main female patron of Buddha, a billionaire in today's terms, had attained the first level of freedom from suffering at age 7. She was married with 32 children. Each time she visited the monastery of the Buddha, she was adorned from head to toe with jewelry of the most precious stones, and yet she had passed the first stage of freedom from suffering. Another example is that of a wealthy princess who fell in love with a hunter and eloped with him to the jungle and led a married life there. She had also attained the first stage. One more example is that of an alcoholic who attained the fourth and last stage. There are prostitutes, gangsters, thieves, murderers, wealthy kings and queens, all who enjoyed one or more levels of the bliss of freedom from suffering while living in a secular environment. So what does this exactly say about practicing Theravada Buddhism in a secular environment? It is all about becoming aware or being informed about the automated state of suffering. As a result of this awareness, the previous intense clinging to the world of the five senses become less in intensity, thereby relieving yourself from the unrequired suffering. When you realize that there's nothing worth to cling to, again caution not to take at face value, you are able to continue engaging in material things and relationships while you enjoy the freedom of non-clinging. As you can see, detachment or non-clinging is not a practice, but the outcome of grasping the Four Noble Truths. It is all a matter of grasping the Dhamma.
Is Theravada Buddhism individual-oriented and has the goal of attaining freedom from suffering for one's own self and does not incorporate others?
The answer is yes and no. Theravada Buddhism is something you find when you seek after it. It is not a doctrine and it cannot be preached in masses. The reason for it is that what you get to hear in Theravada Buddhism in the beginning seems unacceptable to many. We who are steeped in the world of the five senses are not ready to accept the Four Noble Truths. That is why the Buddha did not teach Dhamma unless people came to him in search of his Dhamma. He traveled for miles, making himself available to those who were in search of a path. He did pursue after some whom he knew were ready to grasp what he had to teach. An example of this is Angulimala. Therefore, I do understand why some consider Theravada Buddhism to be individual-oriented and does not seem to reach out to help others.
How does Theravada Buddhism help others by remaining individual-oriented?
Working on yourself and cleansing yourself is the greatest help you can do to humanity. Your thoughts, words, and actions affect the rest of the world, plus the energy space that surrounds you. And it depends all on you. Most of the conflicts in the world are caused by clashes of opinions, and Theravada Buddhism, being absolutely devoid of opinions, gives you the power, based on the truth of universal suffering, to produce your own thoughts, words, and actions. Working on yourself in this manner and guiding others to achieve the same abilities is the greatest compassion you can give, that heals not only you, but the entire universe. Now that you know that Theravada Buddhism is neither exclusively monastic nor does it reject this life, instead it only intends to reveal to you the freedom from suffering by revealing to you the underlying causes of suffering and how to mitigate them, let's see how you can practice it from wherever you are. In Theravada Buddhism, practicing means learning. The entire first level of practice consists of learning what suffering is as led by the Four Noble Truths. We tend to try and balance our joys and sorrows in life, so there is less chance that we'll welcome the truth that the world is suffering right at the front door, especially when it is taken at face value. It is dangerous to take such concepts as suffering at face value, and that is why you need a teacher who can guide you. Either you listen to the explanations by Theravada monks or read books that explain these concepts. then you will see that, for example, mindfulness in Theravada Buddhism is not something that you practice on actions, but it is an act of cleansing your thoughts, which are the causes of suffering. Or tranquility is not something you practice by focused meditation, but a natural outcome of grasping the truths. Alright guys, that's all I have for today. Hope I could remove at least some doubts regarding Theravada Buddhism and you feel motivated to try and learn it so that you can enjoy the bliss of freedom from suffering. If you have any questions or doubts, please put them down in the comments. And if you like this video, please like and share. I'm so grateful for your support, and please do not forget to subscribe to my channel. I'll be doing more of these videos. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.